I'm standing on the very site where Union and Confederate forces met at one of the bloodiest engagements of the American Civil War. Exactly how this breastplate came to rest beneath the soil at this exact location can only be left to the imagination. But what we do know is that Confederate forces crossed that ridge and met an advancing line of Union troops, turning this peaceful valley into a scene of fierce confrontation. Hello, I'm Bob Trevillian.
And I'm Frank Carter.
Welcome to Treasure Search. Despite the bitter legacy of the Civil War, few would deny that these soldiers were true American heroes fighting for a cause in which they deeply believed. And there are those who consider their exploits legendary. They searched the battlefields, the encampments, and a myriad of other sites for artifacts that were lost during those 4 years of civil turmoil. History lives here beneath these grounds, and the treasures it holds are the relics of war.
Fort Sumter, Antietam, Gettysburg, Shiloh, Appomattox, names that will live forever in the history of the United States of America. A war that saw more than 600,000 men perish. American against American, brother against brother. A war where superior firepower was matched by superior leadership and gut-wrenching determination. In the end, the battle scars would stretch from the Rio Grande across the South and as far north as Pennsylvania. Historians agreed that this was the first of the modern wars. Repeating rifles, heavy artillery, and the extensive use of the railroad contributed to a new level of military strategy. Ironclad warships muscled their way into the naval arena with the legendary battle between the Monitor and the Merrimack. But the heart of the American Civil War was the soldier himself. Infantry, cavalry, artillery. They fought the battles. They celebrated victory. They suffered defeat. It has been often said that the soldier of 1863 was undisciplined, underfed, and ill-equipped. Nevertheless, these men were the fighting machines of their time, and their legacy can be found in the very soil they tread upon. Today, these battlefields are hallowed monuments spread over thousands of square miles of diverse terrain. Mountain regions, swamps, farmland, and forest. It's no wonder that this modern breed of adventurer, the Civil War relic hunter, has found an endless source of military collectibles. Although some artifacts have deteriorated beyond recognition, others are unearthed in superb condition, hidden beneath the soil for more than 100 years. The electronic metal detector is the prime tool of the Civil War enthusiast. With it, he can scan the surface of the ground and pinpoint buried metallic artifacts. It sees where the human eye cannot. Civil War projectiles are a common find. Bullets and pieces of detonated artillery shells pepper the battle sites. Buttons, belt buckles, and a wide assortment of military accoutrements are found as well. However, the real prize for the searcher is to discover a rifle, a musket, or even a revolver. These are truly once-in-a-lifetime recoveries, sought after in earnest by a growing number of collectors. Bert Hebb, an experienced treasure hunter, spends much of his weekends and spare time combing the vast territory where Blue and Gray marched. The battle sites, the forts, and the encampments have become a second home, a sanctuary for serious artifact excavation. At dawn, Bert Hebb joins Frank and Bob, packing their instruments and recovery tools as they prepare to travel to a fresh site. Curiously enough, each treasure hunter prefers his own electronic metal detector, a personal choice formed after years of field experience. There are no textbook answers. Even the tools they use to excavate artifacts vary widely. They are indeed individualists, but at the same time, they share a mutual ambition, the desire to continue the search, to discover new and even unknown relics of the war between the states. Here in early spring, before the farmlands are ready for planting, these three treasure hunters travel to the heart of the battle site. In July of 1864, 20,000 soldiers engaged in heavy fighting in an effort to control a stretch of territory along the banks of this river, Although the confrontation lasted only a single day, the casualties were considerable, 2,400 dead and a large number of wounded. The Southern troops finally pushed the outnumbered Union soldiers into a confused retreat. Confederate cavalry would pursue and take many prisoners. Only nightfall would silence the guns and bring an end to this day of struggle between the blue and gray. Before beginning their search, Bob, Frank, and Bert study various maps to determine what areas of the site will in all probability hold the richest concentrations of Civil War artifacts. Historic battle maps are compared with topographic and modern maps to piece together the battle layout. They decide to divide their search and cover more territory. In the event that a substantial amount of artifacts are discovered, that hunter will locate the others, and then their efforts can be combined. Within a relatively short period of time, all three men unearthed various bullets referred to as mini and round balls. Fragments from artillery shells also fill their pouches. But Bert is the first to dig a rare item. A company letter, H, one of the many examples of the varied accoutrements that adorn the uniform of the soldier. Fortunately, the silver content of the letter has preserved it well from the harsh, acidic soil. Bob has worked his way along an embankment to locate a stream where much of the fighting took place. Although clean and clear today, a journalist who witnessed the battle in 1864 claimed that these gurgling waters ran red with the blood of fallen soldiers. Giving testimony to the reporter's claim, Bob finds a bullet lying at the bottom of the stream, twisted and distorted, obviously having made contact with its target. Following the water's edge, he comes to an old stone viaduct used for the railroad. Troops, artillery, and other equipment were sure to have traveled along this route. A signal from Bob's metal detector indicates a target along the edge of the stone abutment. He's learned through experience that a response of this intensity usually indicates an item larger than bullet size. After opening the hole and digging a portion of earth, the object still remains buried and requires more excavation. But on the second attempt, Bob hits pay dirt. A U.S. belt buckle makes for an excellent recovery.
When a buckle comes up, it's time to celebrate. Because of the kinds of metals, usually brass or bronze, used during the molding process, they usually come up in better condition than most of the other metallic artifacts.
A makeshift hospital during the battle, this old home shows the actual bullet scars on the windowsills. Along the front yard, Frank has dug up a hat pin in excellent condition. The pin is bugle-shaped. It designates the soldier as belonging to the infantry division of the Union Army. Although the metal accoutrements survived the many years of underground exposure, the cloth items, the hats, and the uniforms have deteriorated beyond recovery. As the search continues, Bob unearths a pair of cast iron balls, referred to as grape shot. They were fired from artillery in shells called canisters. Once detonated, the canister delivered as many as 50 grape shot, weighing nearly half a pound each to the target area, causing extensive damage to enemy forces. Iron, the workhorse metal of the Civil War, the least expensive and the easiest to produce. The majority of artillery and their projectiles were cast from this metal. Exploring the perimeters of the battle site, Frank and Bert have discovered the remains of several furnaces where iron was smelted for the weapons of war. During the confrontation, the Confederate Army attacked the ironworks, inflicting heavy damage to the structure, shutting down this strategic Union facility. Bert, working in an extremely deep hole, calls Frank for assistance. When excavation reaches this point, the traditional hand tools are inadequate, but the small entrenching shovel that Frank carries along is much more suited to the task. Nearly 2 feet below the surface, the object comes to light, but the men are extremely careful. They realize that artifacts this deep are usually artillery shells, and this target is no exception. A 10-pound parrot shell, used liberally by both the Union and Confederate armies, is delicately lifted from the hole. Later it will be examined and diffused if necessary. Later in the day, the 3 men have geared for searching shallow water. They decide to challenge the river, hoping to discover the relics lost when blue and gray clashed along the banks. With submersible metal detectors, long-handled scoops, and sifting devices, Frank and Bob are well prepared for this method of artifact recovery. Almost immediately, targets are detected. The first signal for Frank is a pleasant surprise, a United States large cent, dated 1802. Civil War battle sites yield many coins. Soldiers, of course, carried the metal currency of their time, and consequently much of it was lost in the heat of confrontation. Bert, scanning the banks and using a small hand scoop, makes the recovery of the day. A Confederate rosette, an ornamental piece found on a harness of cavalry horses. The value of this piece is in excess of $300.
Confederate artifacts were more desirable because they were not as well equipped as the Union side. The production in the North was probably 2 to 3 times that of the South.
By day's end, the river has offered a rich assortment of history, including crossed swords and insignia representing the cavalry forces. No doubt they will return to this site often in search of more artifacts from the war between the states. The fraternity of Civil War artifact collectors has grown steadily over several decades. Shops specializing in the trade have experienced a great deal of success, acting as a headquarters for this cult-like following. Courtney Wilson is one such proprietor. His store is well known among Civil War buffs, a meeting place as well as a source of information on the military collectibles market. Bob, Frank, and Bert Hebb are visiting American Military Antiques to discuss the current status of Civil War memorabilia and to share information about a promising new site to search for relics. To walk into this quaint shop is to take a step back in time. The museum-like atmosphere with display cases filled with fascinating items is enough to excite any relic hunter. The myriad of artifacts from rifles and swords to accoutrements of all kinds, including authentic uniforms, is extensive to say the least.
I worked about 10 years for the National Park Service. They're the caretakers, I guess you could call them, of the nation's battlefields. And just walking over those grounds day in and day out, it just created an interest in me in that era of history, an unbelievable interest. Well, finally, I guess I just had to make the Civil War my livelihood.
Knowing someone like Courtney is a real advantage for the Civil War relic hunter. He comes across a great deal of inside information, valuable leads to fresh sites and new areas to search. Those are the kinds of spots that hunters are really looking for.
This quest for Civil War treasure will last several days, as the men have plans to search a variety of locations. Here, as the day draws to an end, they set up camp, preparing for an early morning start, anxious to explore the new territory suggested by Courtney. The region they set out to search is composed primarily of foothills on the outer edges of where the main confrontation took place. Encampments were scattered over a wide area, along with dozens of small skirmish sites. Many times these locations proved to yield an abundance of artifacts, areas that some treasure hunters overlook. A South Carolina uniform button is a surprise initial find, since Confederate militaria is by far much more rare than Union artifacts. The origin of buttons is easily distinguished since each state had its own unique seal. Civil War bullets are generally a common find during a dig, but Bert discovers a rarity referred to as a U.S. base. Through the core of this projectile, the letters U.S. can be seen clearly. From a collector's standpoint, this bullet is an excellent recovery. Bob has located the remains of a series of chimneys that supplied heat and cooking facilities for the troops. Although well overgrown, they can still be recognized. Bob's metal detector signals a target, and within minutes, a sword scabbard is unearthed. The leather has long since deteriorated, but the metallic section of the top is fairly well preserved. Inevitably, some finds bend the imagination. This relic, referred to as crossed cannons, was neatly cut into two pieces. The pin was worn on the hat of a soldier serving in the artillery division. In the heat of battle, the thought of a slashing saber severing the cannons crossed Bert's mind and reminds him of the grim reality of men and war. The three men continue their search through the hills, which yield a myriad of mini balls and round balls, including an unusual find by Bert. A decaying tree, long since fallen, finally gives up the secret it held for over 100 years.
Sometimes you get a hunch. It's almost as if the ground has a certain look to it. Sometimes a hunch like that pays off.
Here it pays off in a big way as he excavates a full bayonet.
In my mind, I can picture the soldiers in battle using their bayonets during a charge. That's why searching for artifacts like this is such an intriguing experience. History comes alive. You can feel it and touch it, and it can be preserved for future generations. Leaving relics of the Civil War buried and left to decay beyond any chance of restoration is a tragedy. That's what this is all about, preserving our heritage.
The three men concentrate on the last dig of the day. Bert has located an artifact jammed under a tree root, and after several unsuccessful attempts to dislodge it, they decide to cut through the root itself. Frank, who carries a combination tool just for situations like this, performs the surgery. The legacy of the blue and gray still haunts the annals of American history, kept alive by those who travel the back roads in their continuing quest for the relics of the Civil War.
I don't believe it. I just don't believe it. Unreal. There's a museum piece here. It's a Union breastplate with a bullet stuck halfway through it.
That's incredible, Bert. I've never seen anything like it.
I'll never find another one like that. Never. That's a find of a lifetime.